Hello, everybody, and welcome to the User Research Strategist podcast. I'm super excited about today's topic and to have Prama here talking about continuous discovery as a user research practice, because it is quite an interesting and intriguing topic. Hi, Prama.
Hi, Nikki. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm so psyched to talk about this topic in particular and to talk to you about it. Do you mind just giving a quick introduction to the audience just about yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Prama. My pronouns are she and her. I'm based in London. I've been a user researcher for about, I would say, a decade. It feels really long. And I started my career being a service designer and user researcher working in smaller studios. And also at that point of time, there was a lot of digital transformation happening. So really thinking about both digital and physical experiences and how they work together. And then I transitioned into product career and became a UX researcher formally. And I've worked with Uber, Zalando, where we worked together at N26, Meta, and now I'm at HubSpot. Interestingly, I've spent most of my career in growth. It was not an intentional choice, but it so happened that I worked on growth products. And that's also why continuous discovery is a very interesting topic for me, because in growth, we're always chasing really, really ambitious goals, and continuous discovery becomes an opportunity to sort of to help a research meet product deadlines.
Oh, I love that. And I think that is so super central to our careers right now as user researchers is being able to help products and organizations that are trying to grow because that's what everybody wants,
Yeah.
literally.
Yes, that's the ultimate goal, right? Everyone wants to build a product that actually works for the customers and be able to do it at a pace. I want to say that's healthy, but also that's quick enough to the market.
Yeah, I don't know how that's a whole nother can of worms, how we actually balance growth with, yeah, healthy growth. But yeah, I'd love to kick off the conversation by having you define continuous discovery because it has been cited 50,000 times in 50,000 different ways by 50,000 different people. So I'd love to just hear your definition of it.
I think that's a great start. And I hear you. I think continuous discovery has been defined in different ways. And I think at the core of it, it's discovery. Discovery is ability to learn new things. But I think of continuous discovery as an operational framework because it helps a research scale in specific contexts. It's not like it's a new research methodology, but it is about how do we make sure that research is operating at a pace that works for product, is able to get net new learnings continuously and build high confidence around it. But I don't think it's a different research methodology. I just think of it as an operational framework that works.
I love that. I love that operation framework and helping people get to their goals in a way that makes sense for them and helping them learn and discover that new information over time. And so I'm wondering within that, how do you balance, and maybe we are opening this can of worms, how do you balance discovery, something that a lot of people think of as slow moving, let's say, with that more rapid growth and fast moving pace?
I think that kind of worms is unavoidable when you're talking about continuous discovery. But I see when you think about discovery, what slows down discovery is the operational setup that is needed. It's some of the decisions that you have to make around what are the questions we want to ask, how do we get the people that we want to speak to, how do we get enough data? Like for instance, if it is qualitative, then enough confidence in that data. So I think what continuous discovery helps with is making sure that there is a pre well thought process. The process accounts for all of these moving pieces. The process accounts for different teams, different stakeholders. The process accounts for how you're collecting data and analyzing it. And also, how do you build confidence in it? Because it's not possible for you to build confidence on data that you're collecting in 1 week by basis on speaking for a few customers, right? How do you get that sort of confidence? How do you triangulate that data? I think that's what that helps with setting up the processes so it can be scaled.
I love that. Yeah, because a lot of people I think about continuous discovery of, we're just chatting to a few people every week for X amount of weeks. And what does that actually lead to? I know a lot of researchers who have been disappointed in people at their companies who are doing continuous discovery. And it's just like these almost pointless conversations with customers over time.
I think that's a very valid concern because I think because of these different definitions that have existed, it becomes like a medium of talking to customers. While that is true and it's helpful, when you think of it in the research context of using continuous discovery in research context, I think one needs to answer questions around, okay, what are the critical questions that we're going to answer? Are these questions evolving week on week? Are the audience that we are speaking to evolving week on week? What methodologies do we need to account for? Like, not all methodologies work in the context of continuous discovery. Like, if you think about it, I don't think usability testing is a very good methodology for continuous discovery. Continuous discovery by itself, I think, supports generative research
Mhm.
and supports evolving generative research, but it is an intentional approach. There needs to be a lot of processes that need to be set in, and that's why I say it's an operational framework and it's not a research methodology.
Do you want to get all of your user research questions answered all while hanging out on your couch in sweatpants? No need to join any live webinars and hope that your question gets answered. No need to Google a million different things and sift through some scattered advice that you don't really know is valid or reliable. Not anymore. I know it sounds too good to be true, but I promise it isn't, because if you become a paid Substack subscriber, you get access immediately to a community filled with user researchers that I am in every single day answering questions. Not only can you hang out on your couch, feel less alone as a user researcher, and get all of your questions answered, not only by an expert, but by a bunch of other user researchers with amazing perspectives and experience, you can do all of that on your couch in sweatpants. And I will be alongside there with you every step of the way. So join my paid Substack, get immediate access, and we can relax together solving all of your user research problems. See you there.
I'm wondering actually, what are some of the methodologies that you tend to use within this continuous discovery framework?
That's a great question. I think it's a mix of a few things. What has worked for me is using qualitative surveys and using interviews. Qualitative surveys because you can collect a larger amount of data and you're meeting the customers where they are. For instance, sending emails and response to emails in just two questions. It's not like a survey that they have to fill out. It's not a long survey. And interviews, again, are really helpful. You can go dive deeper into these interviews. But again, these are open-ended questions. They're generative in nature and they're not very, very specific. So if the intent is to answer very specific research questions or target very specific user cohort, then continuous discovery does not work in that context because it can't be scaled.
Interesting. Yeah, because I think about whenever I started with continuous discovery, I got so concerned about the broad nature of the questions that I ended up asking very, very specific questions that some people couldn't answer. And so I love that, bringing that back, because there's like bad memories, nightmares about that kind of stuff. But I'm curious, do you have any sort of steps that people could follow or any tips that people could follow to understand, oh, this question or this set of questions are good for continuous discovery? I know we said usability testing isn't a great method in general, but are there some, like, I don't know, hints to questions that might be applicable?
Let me think about that. I think it's like a decision framework that you'll have to consider every time you're thinking, will continuous discovery apply or not? And I also think it works in certain contexts. So if you remember my intro, I talked about growth. It works really well in the context of growth, especially when you're trying to find product market fit, because you want to understand if you what are the needs and pain points that users have, and if your product is actually solving for those. And you need to continuously understand it across different segments. So I think much product questions across different user segments, trying to find answers around growth, those are the contexts it really works in. So I think it's like a decision framework. So think about, okay, this is the research question. Is this question going to continue over a longer period of time? Are we going to assess this question for different user segments? And are these questions broad enough for users to actually answer? I think that's where continuous discovery is really helpful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love that. Is this question relevant over time and over a larger group of people? Because as you said earlier, continuous discovery, it's about evolving the research. And it's almost like you're asking kind of evergreen based questions rather than there's very specific, like, what do people think about this one thing in this one moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even questions from, like, for instance, if you want to understand a certain feature or a certain product idea is working for a certain segment, I think that's already very specific. You want to understand more broader problems and needs. That's why I think of it as a generative in nature. It's amazing for generative research. It's amazing for broader questions. And it's amazing for a wider group of audience. For instance, if you want to go into a new market, or you want to acquire, you want to get product market fit, or you want to get a new segment of users and build solutions for new segment of users. In those scenarios, I think it works really well.
Yeah, that's wonderful because that's a really concrete way of thinking about, hey, is this applicable to continuous discovery or not? It really helps narrow down that decision tree quite
Yeah.
a lot, which I think people really struggle with. And I am curious because you did talk about it as like an evolution, right? So it's evolving over time. And I'm wondering, can you give some examples or general guidelines on how is this meant to evolve over time? If you start with this question, does the question change over time or how does that work?
I think it could work in multiple ways. The questions can change over time because your understanding has evolved. Like, for instance, maybe you started with understanding, okay, what are the needs and pain points for customers when it comes to a certain, I don't know, a certain scenario, right? How are they currently solving for those problems? What are the pain points in the current solution? That's where you started. But then you realize that that looks different for different segments. The pain points itself are different for different segments. So as you reach to more people, as you collect more data, your understanding of that problem space will evolve. Henceforth, your questions will also evolve. But the fundamental questions are still the same. It's how you're segmenting those users that will change, or the specificity of the questions will change. So you will still start with a product question, but you will want to get more details to help your product again sort of make decisions. Because I think when continuous discovery starts, the answers are still very high level and they're not necessarily very actionable immediately. But as the discovery evolves, your insights will get specific, more and more specific, which will help product action. So it takes a little bit of time for that flywheel to kick off.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like painting a picture. You might not see it right away, but as time goes by, the picture starts to take shape and then it's suddenly there in front of you.
It takes a little bit of time for that, all of that to happen. Absolutely. I think I love the painting analogy.
It somehow works. But yeah, and so I'm curious especially about these segments because I think that as user researchers, especially in the qualitative space, we can get really nervous about segmenting our participants in the right ways and making sure that we're talking to a diverse amount of people. So we're not just trying to do continuous discovery, generative research on 12 people in general. We're trying to actually understand 12 people in this space and maybe 12 people in this space, in this space, in this space, right? And so I'm curious, do you focus on one segment at a time when it comes to continuous discovery, or are you kind of talking to a bunch of different people and then continuing to talk about a bunch of different people and then, how does that segmentation work for you?
The answer could be both. The way that has worked for me in the past is I have worked with my teams to identify the segment. Say, we want to talk to customers who are not adopting the product at all at this point of time. So that's the segment we want to go after for this week. That's a very neat box. You can go out of that segment for this week. But in reality, it's not necessary that they will respond to your reach out immediately. So it sort of spills over, right? I think so. It doesn't fit in that neatly defined boxes. It's important to understand how you're collecting that data and how you're sharing that out. So, for instance, if this week I'm reaching out to customers who have not adopted the product, I might want to reach out to 10 people or 8 people or 15 people wherever I hit that confidence. But that is not going to happen in this way. But I still have to share those learnings. So clearly signposting that this is observations based on talking to 3 customers, and we will build on this knowledge over the coming weeks is helpful. And it is a messy process. And it is unpredictable because people have to respond, people have to have the time to speak with you, people might get back to you at a later point of time. So again, having that framework or a structure to collect the data, having a strategy on how you want to share that information out, and clearly communicating that, okay, these are just observations based on small group of people. While valid, we still need to get greater confidence on them is very helpful. And the last part to it is triangulating. So for instance, maybe the product needs to make decision next week, and I'm not at a luxury of waiting for more people to respond. So then the best way to operate in that particular situation is to also have other partner teams who might have collected data leverage their data to build that confidence. So it's not a perfect process. It's not as structured as it looks. And unlike a typical research methodology where I have the time and energy to collect all of these interviews, do analysis, and share out, I don't think continuous discovery works that way. So that's why it's an intentional operational structure and clear signposting, thinking through all of these moving pieces and making sure that you have you've thought of all of these scenarios already and how you will operate under them is really helpful.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I really love how you're like, hey, we talked to this small group of people. It was 3 or 4. This is valid information, but we will continue to build on that because that is the reality. Like, especially when you're talking and trying to get a hold of people who've churned, who just don't care, who probably hate you or don't, yeah, just don't care about you. It's so hard to do that. And if you're thinking, oh, I need to get all these people in 1 week, that's not, yeah, it's just not what happens.
I also think people have lives. For instance, people are, it's a vacation time and people are off doing vacation, or people have their own, like, especially in B2B, people have businesses to run. So it's not like they can respond immediately, which is also why I think having multiple ways of collecting that data is helpful. So using qualitative surveys is really nice because they can give you the answers at that moment. And if they have the time, they can follow up with an interview and you can make that decision based on the data you're collecting. So I think every time there's a data collection that happens, you have to make these conscious choices and decisions all along.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes so much sense. And I love what you said about that qualitative survey. You don't need to make it a formal survey. We used to send out emails exactly with 2 questions. And I gave people the option to write or write down their answers, record a video of their answers, or record an audio of
Yeah.
their answers. And I was like, you can send it to me in whatever format you want, just get it to me.
Yeah, that's absolutely really helpful. I think one of the things is also thinking about what is the best way for the customer to actually give you that feedback. So in my project, I was working with marketers and marketers feel quite comfortable writing emails. So that became like a very easy, quick win. But I could imagine that someone who does not write as many emails, if that is your target segment, then think about what is the easiest way to meet them where they are and collect the data from that point.
I remember working on a site that was targeting an older population. Emails, we could not have gotten them to respond to an email in years. We would have been sat there. You know what they loved? Facebook, because that's where they were. And we were actually able to outreach them on Facebook and get them to participate via that medium. And I love that. Meet your participants where they are.
Yeah, I think the expectation that they have to sign up or do something that they wouldn't typically do is already going to prevent them from participating.
Yes.
So I loved your example. I have another example where I was doing research with drivers in India. Best medium, WhatsApp. WhatsApp voice recording is what works because even typing can be multilingual, so it won't work. So voice recording, WhatsApp is the perfect way to reach drivers in India.
Yeah, sometimes it seems so obvious when you say it out loud, but sometimes it's these things we get stuck in this, email people the consent form, have them sign up versus via a Calendly link or whatever. We get so stuck in these ways that sometimes we can forget there's a whole host of other ways to get in touch with people that might be better.
Hey everyone, I have been taking some business courses recently and am launching a new membership that's all about how user researchers can become more business savvy, more strategic, and more of a business partner in their organizations. One of the biggest questions that I get asked is, hey, my organization isn't really mature. It has like a low user research maturity level. Please do not let the maturity of your organization dictate your user research career. That's what I did. Because I was in a lower user research maturity, I kind of let myself stagnate and I didn't really learn new things. And with that, my skills kind of like deteriorated. I lost a lot of time that I could have used to learn really, really important skills because they weren't necessarily applicable to my organization at that time. But guess what? I got fired. And then it didn't really matter what maturity level my organization was at because I was no longer there. And I wished that I had taken the time to learn some of these skills because they would have been applicable at the next places that I went into. I know that it can be hard sometimes and frustrating when you're in a low maturity organization and you want to push things, you want to learn new things, but please, please, please don't let your current organization and their levels of maturity impact your future career, because I promise you, you will not be there forever and you will need the skills that you need to learn in the future. Promise, 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 especially with the user research industry changing and us hopefully moving into that more strategic space and operating more as business partners and innovation partners to our organizations. Also, if you want more details on my membership and how to become a little bit more business oriented as a researcher, check out the link that I have. And I hope that helps.
I'm also curious because I see the time, which is just, it goes so quickly. If I were somebody who was just starting out with continuous discovery, I'm a researcher who understands generative research as a methodology, but wanting to maybe put those processes in place that you were talking about, what are some must-haves for me to get started with setting up this continuous discovery framework?
I think the first most important thing is figuring out who your partner teams are. So one is your product team that you're working with, but they could be other partner teams, could be marketing, could be sales, could be customer support. I think understanding who they are, what kind of data they have, and how you could leverage that data would be my start point, because that sort of supports the continuous discovery, even if not directly. You could use that data to build confidence, and that would provide valuable insights to your team every week, ensuring the success of continuous discovery from the beginning. I think that's where I would start.
Great.
Second, I would also create a structure where I could collect all of this information and share it transparently. I know that typically one of the fears that researchers have is that if I share raw data, people will make conclusions out of it. I understand that fear. I absolutely understand that fear. But the other side of this is it helps empathize. So other teams will start contributing to that data collection process. And other teams will also understand where you are in that journey. I think in the case of continuous discovery, it works out really well to build that transparency. So have that framework. It could look like 3 sheets in Excel or Google Sheets. And yeah, like have one sheet where you're mapping out who your stakeholders are, have one sheet where you have all the data that you're collecting through the interviews or the surveys that you're running, and have one sheet where the partner teams can contribute the data directly to that. So everything sits in one place, you have access to all of it, and everyone knows that that is what you're going to use for continuous discovery. Henceforth, everyone is also empowered to participate, to collaborate, and to support you. I think that will really ensure the success of the program.
I love that. There's a lot of, sometimes, at least I found this in my practices. Sometimes I would get really excited and run into things without the thoughtfulness, the clarity, and the intention, which would then lead to something failing completely. Like I ran headfirst into repository building without actually thinking through anything. And I really love that intention of sitting down and making this something that is thoughtful and transparent and using it as a way to help people help you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I completely hear you. Like, for instance, I've done the same with repository. I've done the same thing with other research projects, but with continuous discovery, it's a lot of work. And it's a lot of data that you're collecting over a much longer duration of time. And operationally, it needs to work for it to scale. So if you're putting all of this effort and you've successfully managed to run a pilot for a couple of weeks, if that doesn't scale, it's a lot of energy that goes into waste. So I think that intention helps in just making sure that it's successful and can be run over a longer duration of time. There is support across the organization. Also, it's a way of winning over stakeholders as well, because now that they're part of this process, they also are open to listening to the insights that you're gathering from that process.
Yeah, it's like rather than you going and saying, I'm going to go do this research project and bring this back to you, they're kind of a part of it throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. And they can help you prioritize as well, right? Like, for instance, which segment do you go after next week? They can tell you, they can support you making those decisions, and you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, that's super. And I'm curious because you've talked about a weekly cadence. Are there other ways that you've tried it, like in terms of continuous discovery, like focusing on a segment for a whole month or focusing on a problem space for a whole quarter or anything like that? Or do you prefer that weekly cadence?
I think the problem area needs to be something that I focus on a longer period of time. So, for instance, the problem area is how do we acquire this new segment? That is the focus for continuous discovery, at least for this quarter or this half. It needs to be that long enough for you to be able to collect that data. But when I say weekly cadence, I mean weekly cadence in terms of data collection and readouts. So Like, for instance, read-ons again don't have to be like massive presentations, because honestly, you might not have that kind of data at the end of the week to make that kind of massive presentations or conclusions, actually, or say, okay, this is the insight that we gathered. I don't think that happens at the end of every week, but being able to say, okay, these are the observations that we learned this week. These are the things that came out of the full conversations that we had. It's already helpful for people to come along in that journey. But the focus area for at least for a quarter or a few months needs to be the same. If the focus area is also changing, then there are too many moving pieces, and it's very hard to, again, then it becomes conversations essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we get back into that big problem that everybody's like, oh no, continuous discovery isn't great. Yeah, I love that. So like some things can change weekly, but that problem area really needs to stay consistent. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This was amazing. I could talk to you about this for like the next 5 hours. I feel like
It was so quick. It was
I
so
know.
fast.
I know. So I'm curious for somebody who is interested in setting up continuous discovery at their organization, what is like your top tip, number one thing that you would recommend?
Get stakeholder buy-in, get them involved in the process. It's too much effort if your stakeholders and your partner teams, like your product teams and even your marketing and sales teams, are not important. So get the leadership buy-in, get the support from these teams, find your partners that you can collaborate with. I will say this without any hesitation. I don't think continuous discovery can be run by one researcher. It's very hard for one person to actually drive this. So you will need to identify who your collaborators are and your partner teams are. I would say start there.
Yeah, amazing. And do you have one sneaky other tip of getting that buy-in?
I think that telling them that they will have observations and insights much faster is the buy-in that would really help. So in a typical research process, I don't know, I can't speak for other domains, but in most domains that I've worked in B2B or like driver research, recruitment takes so long that typically to land a research, it takes even longer. So it helps cut that process down. So if you want to get the buy-in, you can tell the team that if we get this set up and going, then we can get insight, observations insight quite quickly. I wouldn't commit to the timelines, but I would say fast because timelines again are unpredictable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially when you put discovery next to something, people are always nervous about it taking so long. So when you can talk about that faster pace, I'm sure stakeholders will be like, that's great because this is what we've been asking for.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it will be definitely faster than a typical discovery process because it's happening on a rolling basis. And I think even pitching that it is happening on a rolling basis, that you will have observations that you can take away at the end of the week is already very helpful for the teams.
Yeah. And you also wrote a great article about this, which I'm going to link to
Yes.
in the show notes, which I'm sure everybody should check out.
Yes, absolutely. I have talked in great detail about the intention and the operational structure that is needed. The article is literally called Operating System for Continuous Discovery. So I truly believe that that's what is continuous discovery. That operating system is what makes it unique and different from a typical research methodology. So absolutely check it out and share feedback and comments. Also, let me know how it works. Maybe I haven't figured out all of these things. I would love to hear more about how it evolves.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody leave comments and questions and everything like that in the comments section because I am also very curious about how everybody's doing continuous discovery or not doing it and scared of it. So, Prama, thank you so much. This was such an incredible conversation, and I so appreciate you taking the time. There was an amazing amount of knowledge and wisdom in here. So I can't wait for everybody to hear it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was amazing.
Amazing. Thanks.